Good morning! Hey! So today I'm going to be testing the new Huda Beauty Matte Obsessions Warm Palette. This is a collab with my good friend V, also known as Vila here on the internet. She's an incredible singer and has a beautiful beauty and lifestyle channel that I really recommend you check out. It's very chill, cozy content with a lot of reviews, long wear tests, and very insightful commentary. She's very eloquent and I love listening to her speak about makeup and beauty and skincare and just anything. I could listen to her talk for hours. She's going to be reviewing the cool version of this palette, so if you want to see what that looks like, then make sure you go watch her channel. If this is your first time to my channel, however, hi, how are you? I'm so glad to have you here. My name's Miki, also known as Miyuki here on the internet. I'm a singer and songwriter, though in this channel I focus more on lifestyle and beauty content. But I try to put an emphasis on how beauty can really help us elevate how we feel and our level of confidence, and therefore we should try and be picky about what we're choosing to add into our life so that we can only use things that really make us feel our best. So if that sounds good to you, I'd love to have you subscribe and join me. But for now, let's get into the first impressions on this Huda Beauty palette. Okay, so first of all, this is the very first time that I will be using a Huda Beauty palette. I've never tried her formula before. I have swatched some of her other palettes in store, especially those shimmers from the Mercury Retrograde palette, etc. Those are just gorgeous, but I've never tried any of them on my eyes, and especially not her mattes. So something interesting about this palette is that it has some cream shadows. I think there's some cream to powder. This immediately reminds me of the Natasha Denona Biba palette, which also has some cream to powdered eyeshadows. Even some similar colors, in fact. I might do a comparison between the two because I think that some colors might be quite similar. But I'm not sure that I've heard Huda Beauty do cream shadows like this before. I know that she's had some sparklier ones and those those petri dish ones that look like bacteria. Oops. Let me know if this is not a first. It's definitely the first I hear of it. So that's quite interesting. What I definitely want to do today is try as many of these colors as I possibly can on my eyes. This is a first impressions, which means that my opinion might change as I continue to wear it during this month. Okay, so first off, I kind of want to see how it applies with nothing on the eye. I just have a little bit of concealer and foundation on my eye, but nothing else. To me, immediately, it jumps out that you could have a more neutral, warm look and also a very warm look. I think I'm going to start with the neutral look and then we're going to go into the warm look and see how we do. Okay, so I'm going to start out by going into the shade up here, which seems like the most neutral of the transition shades. So there's quite a lot of fallout on the pan. Fallout doesn't really bother me, but I did notice while swatching that these seem to be pretty pigmented shadows. So I'm gonna go in with a light hand. I'm gonna go and apply it up on my crease. Really, it's halfway up the lid if you don't have a crease. Actually, let me scooch in a little bit closer so that you can really see what we're doing over here. I'm going in with a very light hand. And this is extremely pigmented. I'm using a Refer 13 brush, by the way. I love the Refer brushes, and I especially love the 13 and 14 brush. I find them excellent for hooded eyes. I don't know if it's picking up on camera, but for it being the most neutral shade in the palette, it already is very warm. I mean, it's in the name of the palette, right? It's a warm palette. I really like the payoff so far. If you don't have a crease and you want to figure out where I'm placing this, you can tilt your head back and I'm kind of pushing it up against the underside of my brow bone over here, kind of patting it in, and then I'm starting to diffuse the top upwards. I need to bring my shadows quite high up always because I have hooded eyes, as I always go on about. But honestly, I really like how this looks so far. Going in with a second dip. And again, same thing. I'm kind of patting it in so that the most color is deposited on the outer half of my eye and then softly blending. I have to say, so far, these blend like a dream. Well, this shadow in particular blends like a dream. I really like how this is going. Gorgeous. Wow. It's doing exactly what I want it to do. I feel like that was a very effortless blend. It just did exactly what I wanted it to do. Okay, Huda, I like it. So because I don't have very much shape in my eye, since they are hooded, I kind of have to invent it if I want an illusion of like a bigger eye and also kind of like an elongated eye. So I really like using these sorts of pencil brushes. This one is the 03 from Refer. I'm going to go in with this dark brown over here, some fallout. And I'm going to place it in kind of like a point, as if I'm doing a wing right out here. And today I'm playing. I want to try and use as many of the shadows as possible. I want to see how deep we can go with these colors. I want to see how they blend into each other without a huge amount of transition. I just kind of want to see how they perform. I'm surprised because for the amount of kick up that they have, it's not extreme, but there is some kick up. I'm not getting any fallout. Going with a fluffy brush now. This is the Rougher 27, and I'm going to start to blend out this shape that I did and see how much it budges. It does blend, but it also vanishes. That's such a shame. And I am aware that there's a cream, right? There's a cream right here. So I'm sure that you could put this on top of the cream and it would stay put much more. But it's kind of disappointing that it just blends out into nothing if you just use it as a normal eyeshadow. It could have been my application. This is just how I like to apply my eyeshadow. Let's do it a little differently. I'm gonna go in with this brush instead. This is kind of a fluffy dome brush. It's a 01 from Refer. I'm gonna dip into this color again. It picks up a lot. I do top it off because I don't want fallout. And let's just go over that again. I usually like to place down the darker colors first even before putting anything on my lid because it tends to have more of an impact. So the fact that I'm putting this down first and that it's blending away into nothing, I don't like. Okay, so far we're happy with one and not so happy with the other. I mean, I like how it looks when you work it in the viewfinder. It looks nice. It's not really looking patchy, at least from what I can see in the mirror. It looks blended, it looks blurring. Maybe it was just the way I applied it first. Maybe it just doesn't like my techniques. I want to go in now with the cream right here. And this time I'm going in with a synthetic brush. I tend to find that synthetic brushes work a little bit better for creams. So I'm kind of just pressing it in. This is quite a stiff brush. And please be aware that even though this looks quite neutral over here, you can even see just when it's picked up just how peachy that color is, right? So it's gonna lean quite orange. The moment that you remove it from all of the other oranges on the palette, you can really tell. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little bit of like as if it were a cut crease because I wanna see how these shadows work. Going to dip back in. It definitely turns to powder when it's on the skin. I do feel like it did a little bit of cutting. I'm not really liking how this is applying with a brush, so I'm kind of going to try, ooh, this is interesting. Just from having this open over here while I was talking to you guys, the consistency in the palette for the cream shadow has really changed. It's become really velvety and not as wet. I'm really curious to see how these perform on my eyes because they are hooded. Okay, it performs much better with my fingers. Could have been the brush that I used again. I'm still figuring out what works best for the palette, but I do quite like that. Okay, so before I start building up the outer corner again and the crease again, I'm going to take this shade right here, the lightest shade in the palette, and I'm just going in with a very big domed flat-ish brush to kind of set that cream. I just feel like all of these colors are so close in value that you lose any kind of definition that you'd built up. I'm not sure how I feel about that yet. We'll have to see how the formula lasts. Maybe for the other one, we'll just leave the cream as is, but my instinct is always to kind of set a cream. We're going to go back into the dark brown and try to blend those two together. I'm turning it over to where I don't have color to try and see if I can blend this middle line over here. But I feel like every time that I'm not careful about where I'm blending, it loses a lot of intensity. And now it's getting a little bit muddy. Back in with a fluffy brush to make sure that the top edge is diffused. So this is as neutral of a look as you can get with this palette. Okay, I'm going back in with the color I used on my crease. I feel like the patting in and then blending out kind of technique is the one that does best. Or at least it worked best with that shade. It does definitely look quite blurring on my eye, and the tones are pretty. Before I do my bottom lids, I kind of want to go over to the other side. Let's try to get through the other eye a little less carefully. Maybe I'm messing with it a little too much. So I'm gonna go in with a fluffier brush right away and go into this light orange shade at the bottom. Picks up very nicely on the brush, and go in on my crease or right under my brow bone. I feel like even though this is a little bit slightly more orange, can you see how it's quite similar to the transition shade that I used on this eye? I do like how they blend out though. I will give them that. I'm going to go in to this color over here, and I'm using my Refer 13 again and just put it a little bit under the previous color to try and build up a little bit of a gradient. That's a pretty color. I do wonder how these would show up on somebody with darker skin than me though, because they're so similar to each other that if you can barely tell on my skin, and I have light skin, it's not super fair, but it's definitely light. Like I'm quite light in Spain. Everybody loves asking me if I'm ill. Especially in the summer. They're like, oh, why don't you go outside? I'm like, I am. I'm just not, I don't tan, okay? Anyway, the difference between the colors, I'm not sure would show up very well on somebody with darker skin than me. Gonna go in the other way this time. We're gonna go in with the very lightest shade first. Pretty much all over the lid except the very outer third half. Can you see though? I don't know if you can appreciate it on camera, but it's so orange. It's very, very orange in real life. It's very orange, and it just looks like what I just have all over my crease. Like the first color that I applied on my crease, this looks the same. I feel like everything kind of looks like the same shade of orange. And I don't know if that's my undertone. Everything looks a lot more orange on me than for most people. Maybe this would be a lot more neutral on other people. But I'm telling you, this is feeling like 5 shades of the same orange, a brown and a red. Let me see if the red even shows up. This time we're gonna go in with a synthetic brush. Maybe this is also gonna work a little bit better. This is just an angled Iono brush. It's just random. I got it off of Amazon. And I'm loading it up here on the end, tapping it off, and just stamping it on the outer edge and blending inward. Let me keep building before I start complaining. Sorry. It's pretty. Okay, it does build a little bit better than I initially expected. It doesn't go as deep as I thought that it would on the pan. And oh God, it's just, can you see how depth-wise, this feels like the same depth as this. And this is a way darker color, way darker. I'm going to try something unconventional. I'm going to go into this cream brown over here. And I want to put it, oh my God, this is a completely different color. Okay. I kind of want to put it on this eye to see if we can build a little more depth. Okay, so this color is a lot lighter than it looks on the pan. Now that I've done that, let me go in with my finger and see if I can build some depth on top of this cream shadow. Feel like the depth is there. Now I just need to kind of blend it, okay? I'm not even going to blend by swiping. I'm going to blend by tapping. Okay, I'm trying to give this the best possible chance. This isn't the most expensive palette, but it's still 30 euros. And for 30 euros, I can have a Kaleidos palette that has incredible payoff and quality. I mean, if I baby it a lot, I feel like we get some depth. But I also feel like it's a little bit patchy up here. Oh God. It's just, the more this is frustrating me. The more that I mess with it, the worse that it gets. I don't know if this is coming across on camera, but I don't like how it's building. I don't like how it's performing very much. I'll have to get used to the formula. It's such a shame because the very first shade that I applied, I was so excited by. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with this neutral shade up here to build a little bit of color on my lower lash line for this eye, and go instead with this color, which I think we haven't used yet. This is the brightest orange on this other eye over here. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit of the red as well, this red right here, onto the outer corner. Very close to the lash line. I mean, I feel like the final look in both of these cases is very pretty. It looks very diffused, very blurred. I like the formula. However, it was kind of a struggle to get here for me. I don't know if I need to get used to the formula. I don't know if it's that my application technique is not what it likes. And then, we gotta mention the elephant in the room. These shades look lighter than my skin tone. They are not, however, and they definitely don't serve as an inner corner highlight for me, which is a big shame because it means I have nothing to brighten up my inner corner. I finished up my makeup by curling my lashes, and I added some of the iconic London mascara and the triple thread mascara in black. This is the mascara I'm still testing out. And then I added some of the Victoria Beckham Satin Kajal liner in bronze. I'm going to wear this for the rest of the day and see how it goes. Okay, so we are back. It has been about 4 hours since I applied these eyeshadows. I would have loved to have worn them more, but unfortunately I'm running out of sunlight and I want to make sure that you can see this properly. So first of all, I'm gonna lean in closer so that you can see kind of what I'm seeing in the mirror and we can evaluate from there. Oh, this has been kind of a roller coaster. I didn't expect to have so many feelings for a palette that's really kind of boring, or at least I expected it to be boring. I mean, it's an all matte palette that's all warm tones. Like, can you get much more boring than that, right? But I've gone through so many different stages of emotion when it comes to this palette. So I'm gonna try to break down all of my thoughts on it. You know, packaging, color story, formula, etc., so that you can make as informed of a decision as possible before buying. Okay, so first of all, let's talk packaging. I am very torn on this. I think it looks beautiful, but it feels so cheap. I love that it's matte. I love the embossed slogan on the top and that you can't really see you know, big bright letters with the Huda Beauty logo. Especially, I don't really like the branding of Huda Beauty with the eyes always at the front. That's not really my vibe. So this I would very happily display. I like this a lot more. That being said, it feels very lightweight, cheap plastic. It does have a nice full-size mirror in it, which I've already gotten my grubby little paws in. In general, I like the color. I think that the other one's even more beautiful. You know, I love my beiges. It feels cheap, but it doesn't look it when it's sitting out. So at the very least, it's a high quality look, even if it's not a high quality feel. Something that I do want to talk about, and that kind of surprised me as somebody who's not used to Huda Beauty. The size. I was surprised that this is a 9-pan because this is a quad from Pat McGrath. And as you can see, they are pretty much the same exact size. And actually, while we're at it, let's look at the total amount of product inside. Okay, so the net weight is 7.03 grams, 0.24 ounces on the Huda Beauty, and 4.9 grams, 0.17 ounces on the Pat McGrath. But size-wise, for a 9-pan, I was expecting something a lot bigger. You can kind of see here that the pans are a lot smaller. I usually always prefer that there's less amount of eyeshadow and more colors to choose from. That being said, I'm not sure this can qualify as more colors to choose from. Quite a lot of these colors are way too close to each other. I'm just confused. I'm not sure who this was designed for. Let me just show you. These are 3 of the colors in the palette, which is a third of the palette. And you can see one of them looks a little bit more orange, but on the eye they show up as practically identical. That's a third of the palette. That's 10 euros. When I see this makes me think, okay, so this is probably designed for somebody that has even lighter skin than me, because then these color differences are going to show up better. But these are the lightest shades. If they are already darker than my skin tone, they're gonna be a mid-tone color in somebody that has a lighter skin tone than me. Okay, then it's for somebody with darker skin than me. But again, we come back to then why are there so many tones that are so similar these tones are either not going to show up or show up as indistinguishable from one another on somebody with skin like mine or darker. I don't think that there's enough contrast between the darkest shade and the lightest shade. The color story itself, and this is something that shocked me because I was not expecting it, and I think it's something that's going to happen as well with the other palette. The color story is not neutral. Before you freak out, hold on a second. These are not the brightest colors that you've ever seen. However, I mean that these are not skin tones that lean a little warm. I was not expecting this when I bought this palette. I was really under the impression that I was buying a neutral palette that would lean warm rather than a palette that was going to be terracottas and oranges. With that in mind, obviously I'll have to watch V's review, but it kind of makes me think that her palette might be more purple leaning than taupe leaning. The formulation itself is very pigmented, which is very nice. I don't know if all of the palettes perform the same. I have no idea what their shimmers perform like, obviously, but I can say that these mattes, in general, perform very, very well. And of course, you've seen me apply it, so we'll get into details. The mid-tone colors, the ones that are not very light and not very dark, perform incredible. They were blurring, they were perfecting. I can see them on camera, and this is some of the prettiest my eye makeup has ever looked. I mean, it looks like I blended it to perfection. And I have to say that as I was applying it, it was doing exactly what I wanted. Those colors just performed incredibly. For the price point, they really, really impressed me because I'm a bougie, spoiled bitch, okay? I'm used to dealing with Natasha Denona and Pat McGrath. So the fact that these were performing that well at that price point was very impressive to me. Not that Huda Beauty is that much cheaper than Natasha Denona. Now, when we deviate from the midtones, everything kind of fell apart. Let's start with the brown shade, which I put on this outer corner here. When I was blending it, it blended out into absolutely nothing. As this is the first time that I work with Huda Beauty's formula, it could be that I'm just not used to her formula, and you have to be kind of careful with the way that you apply it. That once you set a color down, you're only meant to feather out the edges and you cannot touch where you want the most intensity on the eye. It performed a lot better once I put the cream formula on top and then built on top of that. I think that by itself, this was just not building. It was just wiping away into nothingness, and I really didn't like how it performed. Something else that I want to mention is that it did go quite patchy, especially around my creases, around where my eye closes. It was really hard to get a smooth blend there. And now for the cream formula, the cream to powder formula. I can only really compare this to Natasha Denona's cream to powder formula, and expectations are high, let me just put it that way. I really like Natasha Denona's cream to powder formula. It goes down in a very thin layer. It sets down color, but you can build it kind of slowly and it does not budge. The cream formulas really let me down here. They just behave very differently from the Natasha Denona ones. I have to say, I hated how they applied with a brush. I think that you have to go in with your finger. You really need to warm them up in order to be able to apply them and get some kind of payoff on your eye. But even more important than that, they've been creasing since I put them on. I mean, I could see some creasing the moment that I stepped away and looked into a mirror. Don't know if you'll be able to see in there, especially where I have the most folds. I think this comes from the fact that the cream to powder formula is much thicker than the Natasha Denona one. And I even try to set it with the powder to try and give it as good of a chance of working as possible. But it did not really agree with my eye, unfortunately. This is a first impression though, so I do want to try them by themselves without setting them, and I do also want to try them on a base. I did not have a base on my eye today, which means that perhaps it was just acting a little worse than it should have. Not that I think you should buy extra products when you're buying, a 30-euro eyeshadow palette. But if you have hooded lids, you know that sometimes you have to baby eyeshadows a little bit. However, and this makes me madder than you can possibly believe. Even with all of the cons that I've given you, with all of the problems that I've given you, I fucking love how this looks on the eyes. I'm so mad. I'm so mad. I shouldn't like this. It has so many problems, so many reasons why it doesn't work and why it's not worth the money. But oh my God, the way that it blurs just all of the texture on my eyes. I look photoshopped. Like, it gives me like a blown up look. And that's with the creasing. I don't know how this did it. It really gives me that fantasy. And trust me, nobody's madder than I am about this. I can't fucking explain why I love the way I look, but I do. Can I recommend this? No, I really should not. Like, I outlined all of the problems that I found with this palette and why it really didn't work for me and why it won't work for you if you have hooded eyelids, a similar skin tone, a different skin tone. But I love how this looks. And listen, sometimes I think that's just the way that things go. I'm glad that I love the way that it looks because I don't want it to sit around unused collecting dust. So for now, testing inconclusive, but I will continue to test this month and see if I can fix some of the issues so that I can at least justify to myself some of this madness, because I don't know what's wrong with my brain. Please make sure you go and see V's video to see her test out the cool palette. I'm dying to see what she thinks of it. I'm so embarrassed, V, if you're watching this. You'd be so disappointed because this is crease central. I hope that yours performed better than mine did, girl, because it did not perform well. But God, do I love how it looks. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope that you had fun. If you did, then please consider subscribing and dropping a like. And I'd love to see you again here soon. I hope you have a lovely day and I'll see you again on the next video. Bye bye.